Welcome to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe and Dave. Be warned, the discussions in this podcast may contain detailed spoilers. For spoiler-free reviews of newly released films, be sure to check out our show on our YouTube channel. Enter at your own risk and enjoy the show.
You know all those film critics you hear about in the news? Reviews Without Remorse are the worst ones. I'm David. With me is Joe. This is episode 124, and in this show we will discuss Peter Allen Fields has died. Like Joe, you may be thinking, who? But allow me to explain why this one hurts me a bit. Avengers Endgame is being re-released with extra footage. Gotta love the shameless cash grab. Stranger Things 3 gets its final trailer. Ooh, let's see what we can discern. And then, the X-Men are back, but this time with a bigger budget. Joe and I discuss X2, X-Men United. How are you, sir?
I am good, and how are you?
I am not that bad. We're going to knock this out of the park, and then you got to go get packing, because you're on your way to London calling, aren't you?
London is calling, my friend. Yes, it should be a fun little trip. And hopefully after this, as much as I love the jet setting, my wallet does not, so after this, I will take a nice little break.
Yeah, you're going to have to start saving up for Christmas now, dude.
Yeah, amen to that.
I ask you, Captain, what conclusion would you draw?
That Vreenak obtained the rod on Sukata, and that the Dominion killed him to prevent him from returning to Romulus with it.
Precisely. And the more the Dominion protests its innocence, the more the Romulans will believe they're guilty, because it's exactly what the Romulans would have done in their place. That's why you came to me. Isn't it, Captain? Because you knew I could do those things that you weren't capable of doing. Well, it worked. And you'll get what you want. A war between the Romulans and the Dominion. And if your conscience is bothering you, you should soothe it with the knowledge that you may have just saved the entire Alpha Quadrant, and all it cost was the life of one Romulan senator, one criminal, and the self-respect of one Starfleet officer.
Okay, I'm going to go through a little list of things. This man, his name is Peter Allen Fields. He is a writer. He has been writing for a very, very long time. Let me give you an example. He wrote for the TV show The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Rat Patrol, It Takes a Thief, The FBI, The Young Rebels, McCloud. He was huge on McCloud. The $6 Million Man, Man from Atlantis, Knight Rider, Jake and the Fat Man, Legend, Xena Warrior Princess, Star Trek The Next Generation, but for me, it was Star Trek Deep Space Nine where I discovered this man. And the funny part is I've watched all those shows that I've just mentioned. I can't even tell you how many times, especially the $6 Million Man. That was huge with me growing up. All right. This man was a writer for most of them. He wrote the episode of the $6 Million Man that had another Bionic Man in it. To me, his pinnacle episode was in Deep Space Nine, and it's a quote. You're going to hear part of that as the teaser to leading into this, because to me, it's one of the finest written Star Trek episodes ever. And I mean of all Star Trek. Of any Star Trek to date that is done, this is still one of my favorite episodes, like top 2 episodes of all Star Treks that I've ever seen. The episode was called In the Pale Moonlight. It told the story of a Starfleet captain coming to grips with the fact that that Starfleet was losing the war, and the only way they could possibly turn the tides of the war is if they trick the Romulans into joining the war. It was really... you know what? I'm not doing it justice, because if you had watched Deep Space Nine from the beginning and seeing where it leads up to, Deep Space Nine was one of the first shows to do an episodic style of storytelling in a Star Trek show. Most of the Star Trek shows tried to stay relatively self-contained with only minor callbacks here and there. Deep Space Nine really tried to be episodic. Excuse me, not episodic. They tried to have an overarching storytelling. And by the time they got to this episode, you had known all these characters. And like I said, it is my second favorite Star Trek of any of the Star Treks of all time. And he died on June 19th. Very, like, seriously, a man with a career this long and this illustrious, with this many different genres that he touched upon, to have died so ignominiously, it's why I wanted to point it out. He meant something to me, and I get the feeling that if you go back and watch some of these old classic episodes, you may realize he might mean something to you as well. So just a quick call out to this great man who I admire as a writer. Farewell, Peter.
That's it's funny because you're exactly right. When you mentioned his name, I said, "Who the hell is that?" And when you ran down that list, I honestly said to myself, "I can't believe I didn't know that," because I was a huge $6 Million Man fan when I was a kid. If you asked me back then about the $6 Million Man and Sasquatch and Jamie Summers, oh my God, forget it. So yeah, that's a pretty impressive list. So I do not fault you for that one bit. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, and nicely done, my friend.
Okay, now this could be very, very quick. So they're re-releasing Avengers Endgame, which is surprising to me because, as far as I knew, it hasn't been out of the theaters yet, has it? I still see it in theaters.
I haven't. That's a good question. I haven't looked recently, but it is very fresh, so I would not be surprised if it was. But I guess you just sort of have to hit the reset button to make sure it is playing in a bunch of theaters. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure how all that works. Because I know you have. It's weird because you have to sort of plan out long in advance when your movie's gonna run. Yet, if it's popular, it can seem to run indefinitely as long as it's. So I don't know the ins and outs of how that works. So yeah, this is sort of a little interesting one because I almost feel like I mean, obviously, it's a last-ditch effort to try to outdo Avatar and be the biggest moneymaker of all time. Does Avatar have a right to cry foul?
Well, no, because Avatar also had a re-release that got it its numbers.
Okay,
so
that's all right. Now that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's that. That's number one. And number two, I mean, let's face a fundamental fact. This is like you and your brother fighting over, who gets the extra French fry. Because Avatar now belongs to Disney.
Right. Yeah, true. Yeah, so, it's right. I mean, at the end of the day, what's the difference? But I guess Kevin Feige and the guys at Marvel would like to say we did the... And honestly, there's a part of me that feels like it's almost a little deserved. I'm still sort of baffled that Avatar holds that spot.
You remember when Avatar came out? Avatar came out during Christmas. And literally for the weeks after that, nothing new came out. And people were telling people, this is the big event. You have to see it in 3D. There was all this hype that was attached to it. And that's one of the reasons why, it got seen as much as it did. Because it was, at the time, there was no 3D at home. And there wasn't anything like it at the time. So I can understand how it did. And there was no movies competing against it. It didn't have a John Wick 3 coming soon to it.
Right, yeah. And I kind of feel like that's really what it's all about. Is that it really came out at a time when there was nothing playing and it just ran and ran and ran. Because honestly, I sort of feel like I look back and I'm like, what was Avatar again? Like, I mean, the fact that it has outdone Star Wars, Titanic, like all of these major blockbusters that for a long time held that spot. I don't know. I kind of feel like Avatar doesn't really deserve that spot, in my humble opinion. But, so I would sort of like to see Endgame take that, just a Marvel movie in general, especially an epic Marvel movie. So, yeah, it's interesting, but whatever. I'm hearing that it's probably not going to hit Avatar numbers.
It only needs $38 million more to pass Avatar. And, they're sweetening the pot. They're sweetening the pot a little bit. It's not an extended cut, but Kevin Feige says, and I'm quoting here, if you stay and watch the movie after the credits, there'll be a deleted scene, a little tribute, and a few surprises.
Yeah, which basically to me says, hey, you know all that stuff we were going to put on the Blu-ray? Let's just play it after the movie and call it a special edition.
The special edition!
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll see.
You let us in. And now, you are going to have to let us stay.
Doesn't make sense. I closed the gate.
What if he never left? What if we locked him out here with us? He'd want to attach himself to someone again.
Do we really have to wait one more week for this show?
I'm actually a little surprised that you've been watching all the trailers.
I didn't mean to. It was, after the first trailer with, Teenage Wasteland and everything like that, I was like, okay, I don't need to watch anything else. I swore to myself I would not watch anything else.
Yeah.
But then the new trailer came out, and, like, the places that I visit on the web and stuff like that, it's like, oh my God, this trailer. It's like, no, I don't want to. Oh my God. And I couldn't resist anymore. I just couldn't resist anymore. And when I broke, I was like, well, let me see if I could break Joe. And I broke you. So I'm kind of glad that I broke you.
Well, I wasn't really anti either necessarily, but I mean, I remember I think you refused to even watch the one where it was nothing but the old ladies by the pool. And I remember saying to you, dude, it's really not a spoiler. It's almost like a throwaway nothing.
I know, I'm an idiot. I know.
So you avoided that one, and then you watched this one. I was like, wow, okay. Yeah, I
couldn't help it.
Well, anyway, we've seen it. How does it look? I think it looks interesting. I feel like I almost feel like this series is almost getting sort of Twilight Zone-ish, and that is just sort of again, based on the little bit of what I'm seeing, I almost feel like every season now it's going to be slightly different than the one before. So in essence, it almost sort of feels like 8 episode long Twilight Zone episodes, where they each kind of go off in its own unique sort of a direction. It's not necessarily just picking up where the last one ends off and keep on going in a linear fashion, which is good. Again, it's good. It's for a show like this, it needs something to keep you sort of guessing every time, and they seem to have a pretty good handle on how to do that. It's interesting. I thought it's interesting that I'm hearing like voices changing. Like the kids are obviously getting a little older.
Yeah, no kidding. Look at the size of Mike.
Yeah, seriously. What's his face? The kid who disappeared in the first episode.
Will. Yeah, the kid who plays Will. He's huge.
All of a sudden, hey, what's going on? I'm like, all right, Will. Yeah, like, your voice obviously changed last summer. Okay, I get it. And I also noticed they didn't show much of the parents or the grown-ups at all.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, almost to the point where I didn't really see them until almost the end of the trailer. I was actually getting nervous that they weren't in this one. Like maybe they're gonna do something a little different where they're off at summer camp or something or other. I don't know. I thought maybe you weren't gonna see much of the grown-ups this time around, but thankfully they're there because they're good.
Yeah. Well, the main thing about this show that works is it's got really good characters on top of telling an interesting story. I've fallen in love with each of these characters in their own ways, even for their faults and tendencies. Hell, even Joyce, to a lesser extent, in her insanity and so on and so forth, is at least still charming and appealing in its own way. And you got to love David Harbour as Jim Harper.
Yes.
He's just, he's pretty much relatively the heart and soul of the show.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He's he really is sort of the backbone, honestly, and which is interesting because again, I was getting more of an It vibe from the rest of this trailer. Like this is strictly about the kids.
Oh, dude, this was more than just It, man. They threw in a little bit of everything. Did you catch that nice little freaking Shining little callback that they did with Billy Hargrove? Hargrove, I think his name is.
Well, not exactly. Go ahead.
There's a scene of him walking down a hallway where Billy is walking down a hallway and just like a wife beater shirt and everything like that.
Yeah.
And I was getting such Shining vibes from that. It wasn't even funny. I was like, this is Billy Hargrove as Jack Torrance. That's just totally what that is. You mark my words.
Yeah, I could see that. They're definitely pumping him up this time to be more than just the town asshole. He's really good. Yeah, something. Yeah, he's going to be a big player in this one.
Yep. I hope it's good. I really, really hope it's good.
The last two have been stellar. I got faith.
So do I. And they're only doing 8 episodes this season instead of 8 episodes and a potential, spin-off series.
Gotcha. Okay.
Which we haven't heard from lately, have we?
What's that?
Remember that one episode that was like, hey, this could be a spin-off, and everybody was like, this sucked. Haven't heard any more on that, have we?
Yeah, it's funny. I watched the trailer, and then I sort of let YouTube play as I was doing some things, and all of a sudden the next one was like, theories about what season 3 is going to be, and I was like, oh shit, I kind of tuned out, but one of the things they threw out there was, I wonder if any of the kids, well, not so much that they'll revisit that episode, because I think it was universally panned, but maybe the idea that basically that episode was about one of the kids who was also in the lab. Are we now going to have other kids from the lab in a similar way? And I'm wondering, maybe.
Who knows? But we'll find out in a week, and I'm sure we'll talk about it.
We sure will.
You have to understand, we thought Bobby was going to a school for the gifted.
Bobby is gifted. You should see what he can do. Have you tried not being a mutant?
When anti-mutant Colonel William Stryker kidnaps Professor X and attacks his school, the X-Men must ally with their arch-enemy Magneto to stop him. Written by Michael Dougherty, Dan Harris, and David Hayter. Story by Zach Penn, David Hayter, and Bryan Singer. Based on characters created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. Directed by Bryan Singer. X2, X-Men United. This is the best of the series.
I'm with you so far.
I don't know if I like that, however, little tone in your voice there.
Well, sometimes you blurt out something and then you pause, and I'm like, I don't want to interrupt you if you're on a roll. If you're taking a dramatic pause, go for it.
That was definitely done as a dramatic pause. Watching this again, and I hadn't watched it in a while. I was seriously keeping my eyes open for all the mistakes here and so on and so forth. It's like I remember at one point thinking to myself, why did Jean get out of the plane? And thinking that was a stupid idea. But they actually addressed it in the movie, and I hadn't remembered that they addressed it in the movie. So whether the answer was good or not is irrelevant. I just was like, well, they addressed it. They didn't keep it vague or anything like that.
How did they address it?
Jean made a choice.
I have faith in you.
The next time you feel like showing off.
You don't remember that at the end?
No, I do, but
I didn't say, like I said, I didn't say it was a good way, but at least they were smart enough to know that people were going to ask that question. They didn't give a great answer, and to me, it's similar to like when Gordon gives the speech at the end of Dark Knight, at the end of the Dark Knight. It sounds cool, but if you think about what he's saying, it's like this doesn't make a lot of sense.
yeah. What's like saying? Why did Joe wake up this morning, go crazy, rip off all his clothes, and run around in a clown suit and balloons? Oh, he explained it. How did he explain it? He made a choice. Oh, okay.
Exactly. But so I it's like whether it was a bad idea or not is irrelevant, but still they at least had the wherewithal to realize that people were going to question that. But that said, I felt that they managed to give a good amount of time to each of the characters to really have, some decent growth. I felt that where they, you know what the hardest part about this movie is not this movie. I really enjoyed this movie. I liked this movie. I liked the action pieces. I liked the story that they were trying to tell. I even liked the little side trek to Boston to Bobby's parents. I thought that was a great moment in the movie, and it was a nice way of reminding the audience just what the fear of the X-Men and people like the X-Men are. I was going somewhere with that, and I just kind of lost it.
I feel like I totally derailed you going forward. I apologize.
No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. What frustrates me, I remembered. What frustrates me the most about this movie is that there's all this wonderful progress that they do with these characters leading up to the end and setting up for, a confrontation in the next movie. They kind of, in the first movie, they did a subtle little, Iceman versus Pyro thing. In this movie, you kind of was feeling it even more. So now by the end of it, you're thinking to yourself, oh boy, there's going to be this great Iceman versus Pyro thing eventually. And if I remember X3, which we're going to get to next week, I remember it being very lackluster. I kind of felt like they pulled the wool out from under us. I'm watching this movie and thinking about all the setup that they tried to do that wound up not paying off very well.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to detract from this movie because of it, because this movie does it really, really good. It's just frustrating me to think of what happens next.
Yeah, that's very true. And I agree with you that this is the best of the bunch. And honestly, I felt like at moments I was watching this and saying, it really made me want to say thank you to the first X-Men, because like we said last time about the original X-Men, it worked with what it had. The budget wasn't big, et cetera, and they did as much as they could with what they had, but they did set something in motion, and this is the fruition of what they set up. Because I was watching this too. I was like, wow, it is amazing how far they've come in terms of just budget.
Yeah.
Although I do wonder, like, could they have stretched the budget out in the last one a little bit more? Could they have, like, relied a little more on, fake sets, green screens, etc.? Because I'm looking at they're shooting inside, the base at Alkali Lake, the big spillway. At one point, I'm watching them walk around, and the set is massive, and I'm like, wow, they've come a long way from just throwing themselves over breakaway tables at the Statue of Liberty, knocking over the souvenirs. So yeah, it is a wild step forward. I mean, they really do so much more here in terms of everything. The story is better. The story is rich. The characters are fleshed out so much better. The mansion feels more like a real place. All of the settings feel like real places. I'll start out with just an odd little detail. One of the things that really jumped out at me, the jet looks really realistic.
Yeah.
Like, it's like oddly realistic. The part when it's landing in front of Bobby Drake's house, I swear I'm looking at that saying, like, it looks to me like a practical effect. Like, it was really weird. And even like later on when the jet's flying, and even when the Air Force jets are following it and they shoot the missiles, like the missiles look a little fake. The jet, when they cut back to the jet, looks really oddly real. So I don't know why that is or how they did that, but seriously, it just kind of impressed upon me this time around. But
yeah, much better special effects this time around.
Very
across
good.
The board.
Seriously, yeah. I mean, and it again, it's so weird how they can get it right sometimes. Then later on, like seriously, X-Men Wolverine, how they ruin the claws even. Holy cow, is that mind-boggling? Anyway, but but again, it's what's beautiful about the story is that it really is more about, even though the effects and all that stuff is awesome, it's really about the characters and how the characters all move forward, and it's amazing how many people get genuine arcs, how many people feel so fleshed out. They feel very realistic. Their motivations feel real. I mean, seriously, like Wolverine gets a great arc. Jean Grey gets a good arc. I mean, a lot of them really do. Magneto seems more fleshed out. Mystique even seems a little more fleshed out. Sometimes even to the point where I'm kind of wondering why they went with that, went in that direction. But honestly, I mean, you're absolutely right. This film has aged very well. Again, in a time when we can kind of do anything we want, special effects wise and story wise, etc. This film has really aged nicely, and it's still as impressive as it was before.
You know, it's funny, and I don't mean to bag on somebody else's performance, but when I was going into this movie, there was a part of me that was like, "Oh, I can't wait for Swiss Army Knife Mystique, tee hee." You know, being all smart alecky in my mind about it. But I gotta admit, it works here. I don't question it. I never questioned it at any point. I didn't question her, being able to, do her little martial arts skills, being a techie, and so on and so forth, flying helicopters. For some reason, here, I didn't question it. It was never a question of, did I think this character could do these things? For whatever reason, the portrayal of it here worked for me.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I hate to say it, Jennifer Lawrence's performances from any of the other X-Men movies.
Yeah, that's a whole different story. But yeah, no, it's quite the juggling act too, because again, you really have to keep all the players juggled in your mind. Like again, when they're planning who's going to go in, Wolverine wants to go in. He's like, no, because you can't do this. I'm going to send her, but she looks like Wolverine. Like there were points where Nightcrawler, can you do this? Can you do that? No, I have to see where I'm going. You really have to sort of juggle and keep people's powers in mind.
Right.
That's a lot to juggle, and I think they pull it off really well here. They utilize everyone's talents. In a way that really works. Like I at no point did, and again, like I said, this is saying a lot. At no point am I sitting there talking to the screen saying, "Hey, why don't you have so and so do this?" This one has that ability. Go send that one in to do. No, they kind of nailed that.
More so than any other movie since. Like this is the perfect X-Men movie. As far as I am concerned, I will still put Logan. If you want to take the entire quote unquote Fox mutant saga, I will always put Logan at the top. But this is easily number 2.
Yes, I absolutely would agree with that. Again, it is amazing. It's amazing how much of a leap forward it is from the first one. Again, the first one was fine. The first one was good. They did with what they had, but here, boy, did they took it up to the correct level. Seriously, I sometimes find that with these sorts of movies, I sometimes struggle with the stakes, and I remember when we were talking about Dark Phoenix, I was saying I liked that it was not a huge stakes film, even though that one ought to have been. This one, again, sort of pulls a fast one, where the stakes aren't over the top terrible until we reach a certain point. Then they are very steep, but then it takes it up a notch. When again, like it starts off, I think we're just after this guy because he took the professor. We don't know why. Then you realize he's after all the mutants. So now we got a problem. But just when you think you got that resolved, he goes after all the humans. And I was like, that was a pretty slick little twist at the end. So, again, the stakes got pretty crazy, not buildings falling down or any stuff like that. So, yeah, I really thought in that respect, too, they really nailed it.
So, where do you think the problem happened? Because I'm kind of going through, as you're talking, I'm listening, and I'm trying to think to myself, well, where does it go wrong? Because the series never really reaches this height again, as far as I'm concerned. So, where does it go wrong? And I'm gonna throw this out here for you. The only name that is missing from any other X-Men movies that was in the first X-Men and the second X-Men, and that is the screenwriter David Hayter.
There you go. That could definitely be it. I don't want to skip ahead, and I'm actually anxious now to talk more about X-Men 3.
Yeah, same here.
So
we'll get to that.
But that could very well be. That could definitely be maybe the magic is in that screenwriting.
I have to feel that because it kind of feels like All the characters are firing on their own on the right cylinders. None of the characters annoy me. None of the characters do things that feel out of place at any point. And I was looking for that. I was kind of wondering, are they going to do that? And even the scene at Bobby's house, there's Pyro going nuts after Wolverine's been shot and he's been knocked out, and there's Rogue. Rogue pulls her gloves off, takes the power, and puts the fire out.
Yes.
Perfect, of course. What a perfect understanding of that.
Yeah.
The little things like Bobby, just kind of blowing into that bottle of cola, and all of a sudden it's a perfectly cold temperature.
Yeah.
Loved that. Loved the little interactions between the classes. What another thing I miss from the X-Men movies, the fact that the X-Mansion is a school. I think this may be the last time we actually see the school as a school.
Possibly, until maybe the end of Days of Future Past.
Maybe.
That's a good point too. Right, it does have a very realistic feel. I mean, again, they have it is a school. There are children in it. So I kind of felt like, they went the whole scramble to get them out when the and by the way, I still love all the Easter eggs in it, like the fact that Colossus shows up.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean.
Cudmore.
And it was funny too because I watched this with Mary last night. I had to explain to her. I said, "Remember Colossus from Deadpool? That's technically the same guy right there." And she kind of just went, "Oh, he was much younger, I guess." I'm like, "Yeah, there you go."
Yeah, let's go with that.
Right. Not that they totally mutilated the character either way. And I'm joking when I say that too. It's just different takes. But I mean, I love the line where he's walking out with the kids and he's I can help you, and he turns around and help them. Like that was good. I liked that. It was like Colossus is here. He's ready to go.
And how about a little shout out to Mr. Brian Cox as William Stryker?
Yes.
What a great villain.
Absolutely. He's always good and he's terrific here.
Yep. Great motivation, excellent characterization, his desperation at the end to try to save himself by offering Logan the answers and everything like that. All of it played beautifully throughout the entire thing. And God, what a evil, sadistic bastard to do that to his own kid.
Oh my God. Even I love the response from Xavier when he's like, "This is your kid, for crying out loud." Like, oh my God, are you kidding? Yeah, that was great.
They raise the stakes and yet keep it grounded or keep it within the realms of the team, I suppose. I'm not 100% sure where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they easily could have gone over the top, done the whole, building thing, try to outdo we're going to turn all the world into mutants, but yet this feels like intimate, like much more intimate in a way, and yet still like world shaking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's what they do is they manage to keep it confined in the world of the X-Men that they set up. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't lose that sense of self. They absolutely positively kept the same tone that was started with the first one. And again, it works. You're right. They take it to the next level without getting carried away. And again, I love the fact that everyone more or less gets a story arc. I feel like, I almost feel like it's taken for granted when I say that, but I literally mean, like, Wolverine starts out on a quest to figure out who he is and where his place is. So by the time he comes back to the same Alkali Lake and he confronts the people, and then he ends when he says, "I'll take my chances with him." That's him making his choice. The guy says, he's got no answers. I'll take my chances with him. I thought that was great. That was a very good line. The stuff with Jean Grey, now again, we can kind of go back and forth as to whether or not that works. But they did pretty clearly in the beginning set you up to say something is wrong with her, something is off. She's not feeling right. So the fact that I think she makes the sacrifice, she's the one to make a sacrifice at the end. And by the way, again, that I like the fact that someone made a sacrifice. Like, this is the kind of film that it had serious stakes. So to come out with at least one casualty, I thought made sense, and you felt it. It wasn't a throwaway. One of our team. Again, like, it's not like our guys shooting with stormtroopers and a couple stormtroopers fall, one of ours falls. No, this was something you felt. So I think in terms of the story, it really worked pretty well. But again, we can go back to whether or not I thought the actual event was yeah. But anyway, and again, I love the Easter eggs. I love spotting a lot of different characters. The fact that you see Kitty Pryde in this, the fact that you spot Jubilee, right? Colossus actually armors up in this one, looks great. Don't know if the effect was perfect, but again, it was very cool to see him there. So yeah, I mean, just everything about it works, you know. And you're right, the Pyro kind of, you know, he goes through an arc. Like he starts down a path and he keeps on going, like you said. And the fact that he leaves with Magneto at the end made perfect sense. You know, not unlike when Raven goes off with Magneto in the First Class. Again, and that's why the dynamic between Charles and Magneto always works for me, because again, both of them have very reasonable points. There are reasonable places where both men are coming from. So the fact that you would have people switching sides is pretty legitimate in my mind. You know, again, I mean, they are two very clear schools of thought, and you know, so it's very. It makes a lot of sense that you would see people kind of going back and forth. Like, well, who do I fall in line with? You know, some days this one makes more sense. Some days that one makes more sense.
And you gotta love how the consistency with Magneto's character as well, because all what you just said is 100% true. I completely agree with you. I do also like that they didn't take the easy way out when it came with Magneto. When the time came and he got into that room and he stopped he stopped Mastermind, and that's who it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be Mastermind from getting him to do all those things, and instead say, now let's do it on the humans instead. That was just like such a Magneto moment. I was like, of course he would do that.
Yes, totally, absolutely right. That, and again, that I liked that little twist. I remember, you know, again, I've seen the movie several times by now, obviously, but I can remember not quite seeing that coming, going, oh. So that,
and yet when it happens, it made sense. It worked with the character.
Yes, absolutely.
So that was a nice subversion of expectations.
Yes.
I'm still making fun of that goddamn word, but I just can't help it. Yeah. Everybody uses it as like a selling point.
Yeah.
And you know, this movie just proves something to me. When you don't talk about what you're trying to get across, it comes across as more genuine. And it feels like when you have to sit there and explain, oh, we did this to subvert expectations, that feels like a douchey response to try to explain something that they don't have a good answer for. Okay? This movie manages to do these things, manages to, you know, really be honest with itself about its characters and unflinching. And it doesn't actually put them in a situation where they have to monologue to explain their motivations. You know, Magneto doesn't just sit there and say, and now I shall do my evil plan because this was what I was always meaning to do to begin with, because he really didn't know. He didn't know what Stryker's plan was. He just knew that he was trying to steal Cerebro for some reason. He just improvised on the spot.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that the motivations of the characters played out in naturalistic ways with naturalistic dialogue, as opposed to over exposition and over-explaining themselves. You know, so much happened in scenes where there was almost no dialogue that worked better than any words that you could actually say.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I agree. And I like the fact that, you know, Magneto is... It shows that he is someone who is not afraid to... I mean, he keeps saying, you know, the war has begun. You know, this is a war. And with that in mind, he is not afraid of collateral damage, you know. And again, that is what tips him over into the bad guy realm, you know, because again, he makes perfect sense. But on the other hand, it's like, oh, you tried to throw a grenade into my people. Guess what? I'm going to throw it into your people. What? They have nothing to do with it. Tough shit, you know. So yeah, he's a guy he's willing to go there. By the way, best Wolverine fight ever.
Which one?
Which one? The one with him and Lady Strike, is that her name?
Deathstrike, yes. That was a damn good fight.
That, I mean, I still say that, to me, was perfect. That was such a great fight. I mean, again, he's kind of going up against what would be, I mean, we kind of get a little critical of what the Marvel movies, it's the shadowy version of themselves, the evil opposite, right? This was that, but kind of not exactly. Like, it was different enough, but similar enough to make the battle awesome. And again, they gave her the instead of claws, they gave her the nails that are, which I thought worked really well. And again, I mean, I've always said, like, what's irritating is watching Wolverine do, like, remember how I said I knew going into X-Men Origins Wolverine, I knew it was going to be garbage because they kept showing him doing things with the claws that were, it was all of a sudden it became like a Swiss Army knife as opposed to just knives to stab people with.
Yeah.
You have your ability is I have knives that come out that stab people. So for him to fight somebody else with a similar thing, you just stab the shit out of each other, and it looks painful. It looks, over the top, and it hurts, So it really made for an awesome one-on-one battle, and the way he resolves that is also pretty awesome.
Yes. Oh my God, that hurt just watching it.
Right?
I love the little extra thunk sound at the end.
Yes.
Too. There's just something. I mean, it was awful, but there was just something about that. I was like, that's satisfying.
Yeah, I agree.
And yet,
I agree.
Weirdly, I kind of felt bad for the character because in the last second, the eyes, whenever he's controlling the people, the eyes are gray and everything. And like for the last second, the gray disappears from the eyes, and he's no longer in control. And she kind of looked like apologetic for a half second before she died.
Yeah, very true. I agree with that.
I liked that little touch.
Yeah,
it was so nice.
Yeah, and it's honestly, like it's kind of twofold because you first of all, you understood that she was under Stryker's control the whole time.
Right.
So, the idea that she would sort of wake up at the last second made sense. But even if she didn't, even if it was just the idea that you saw her, like, I mean, again, her eyes start dripping the molten steel, which was awesome, So I thought it just worked on every level. It was really great.
Yeah. I feel like there was a great story there with her that we got shorted on. The story with her in the comics is that she feels her father is the true owner of all adamantium, and she wanted to take it back from Wolverine. That's the story in the comics.
That's interesting. Okay. And it's funny you say that because honestly, as I was watching it last night, I did have a moment where I kind of went like, oh, but they had to kill the character off. That would have been a great character to bring back. But at the end of the day, I'm like, you know what? You can't. You do what you can with these characters in the very abbreviated time you have with them. I mean, again, to say that, these movies only come out every couple of years. They're only 2 hours at a time. You can't go so crazy trying to make every character, faithful to the comics and long term, etc. So they were smart. They had a really good way to finish this fight with a really good death. You just kill her off. You know what I mean? And next movie we'll find another one and try to do as good.
Just for the record, for the audience to know, the non-comic book fans out there, this story is based on a graphic novel called God Loves, Man Kills, written by Chris Claremont and drawn by Dave Cockrum. I highly recommend you check it out. It is probably the best X-Men story out there, save maybe only for the Dark Phoenix saga, a movie that they keep trying to make but can't seem to get right. But they got this pretty right within this universe. They made, when we were talking about Dark Phoenix the other week, I said I understand the choices that they made to try to get this story to work in this universe, and I appreciated that they did a pretty good job to semi making it work, but they still have not captured the essence of the Dark Phoenix saga, but here they did catch. It's not the exact same story. It's a completely different story. In God Loves Man Kills, Stryker is like an evangelical priest who's, got a secret, group that hunts mutants. And, extols the sin and godlessness of mutants to the world. That's what that original story was. Now, they took that story and they made that work in this universe, and I feel they made it work perfectly. For artists, is it a great translation of the book? No, not really, but it's a hell of a lot more respectful than any of the Dark Phoenix ones have been so far as I'm concerned, to the source material.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I really do think they've given every character their due, as much as they possibly can. Again, even Rogue, who we mentioned last time, again, her character gets really shuffled around to have a good protagonist, a good dramatic protagonist, a sympathetic protagonist. And here I kind of thought like she didn't get a whole lot to do, but she was utilized pretty well. That shot of her taking off the glove to turn off Pyro, that was very cool.
Yeah, it was a great moment. But I got to say, one of my favorite moments has to be, and it set the tone for the entire movie, has to be the introduction of Nightcrawler.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of hate that he never came back. And
yeah,
I understand. From what I heard, the actor hated the makeup, hated the. I can understand that, but yeah, you could have recast if you just could not get that person back. Yeah, but maybe you could have toned down I don't know. I mean, it's just a shame they couldn't get him back because he's a great character. I love how his interactions with people. I mean, again, Storm's character has always been whatever we need her to be at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I remember when she was sitting down with him, I thought she was going to give him a pep talk. Instead, she says something about anger and how anger keeps you something or other. Or, anger can keep you safe or something or other. And he goes, well, so does faith, which I thought was great. Because, again, it's a great shine on his character. Doesn't really do much for hers, though. I remember thinking, like, I never got that from her character, that she's supposed to be angry. It seemed sort of odd. I didn't get that. But he's good.
He was perfect in the part. The entire opening sequence was beautiful. One of the finest examples of his character since probably. Although I gotta say, some of the stuff that they did with him in Dark Phoenix, I really enjoyed, and very much was reminiscent of this version of him. But yeah, no, this was a great introduction to the character that unfortunately we never get to see again, and I kind of feel really bad on beating on the future movies through this movie. I don't think it's very fair to this movie.
That is true. That is definitely true. Yeah, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I mean, honestly, I feel like at this stage of the game, I feel like not only am I happy with this movie, but it's elevated the one before it, because I feel like that one deserves a little credit for where we are. So yeah, I mean, so as far as where we are now, we're in pretty good shape, I think.
For the show, absolutely. for the movies, yeah, okay, I'll buy that too.
So I will say one semi-negative thing about it, though.
Go on.
I realized watching it with Mary last night, that you really do need to have seen the first one to understand anything that's going on in this film.
It isn't very self-contained. No, you're right.
They really didn't do anything to sort of bring you up to speed on where we are with the characters, and that's a tiny little bit disappointing. But I mean, again, but I'll admit I didn't even notice it until I was watching it with someone else. I thought she had seen them before, and I guess I was wrong. And the whole time she's like, so by the time she's watching the crazy in the wheelchair talking to Professor Xavier, who now thinks he's in the mansion, like, she was totally lost. Like, what am I not getting here? And I'm trying to explain it the best I can, but it wasn't working.
I hate when that happens. But you know what? She's right. This movie is not self-contained. You definitely need to have seen the first one. I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing, but I'm kind of a big proponent of a movie should be self-contained, but on the other side of the coin, you shouldn't need to speak down. If a person is going to see X2, the assumption is they've seen X1.
Sure.
So you shouldn't need to, you shouldn't need to have to do reintroductions of the characters, because by this point they should know it. Think of it this way. Think of it like Endgame. By Endgame,
sure.
If you don't know who the players are, what the hell are you doing in the theater?
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And again, I'm not really holding it as a harsh criticism. It's just a little more of an observation.
No, it's a good point, and we have been consistent in that we believe that a movie should be able to stand on its own, whether it's a sequel or not.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Because
are we backpedaling?
Well, no, I mean, like you said, Endgame. I mean, does Endgame really have to spend the first 20 minutes recapping everything that came prior? I mean, again, it's like part 2 of a TV show. Last week on the episode of whatever. I don't know that it needs to do that. If a movie wants to be a 2-parter, for example, yeah, you should have seen the first part. So. I'm not knocking it that it doesn't stand on its own, although it could have done a little more to kind of get you up to speed on where we are and who's who and why. But yeah, it's definitely not an automatic check mark. It's not. I would not say it's an instant fail because of that. It's not a knock on it because it doesn't do that. It's really just more of an observation that you really need to see the first one before this.
Okay.
So
I get where you're coming from, because I agree with you that it should be better than that, but I guess there really is no easy answer for that.
It should stand on its own in terms of I want to see like a story arc that begins at the beginning of this film and ends at the end of this film, not
which this movie does.
Right, exactly. I mean, if the movie feels like it just picks up in the middle, again, if it's part 2, so yeah, I mean, seriously, I kind of gave Infinity War a hard time because I said this movie feels like part 1. It should be called part 1, or it should distinguish itself in some way. Endgame is essentially part 2. They just decided to call it something else. This one, at least, it is called X-Men 2. So there you go. That should tell you something. So yeah, I mean, I suppose there's no cut and dry, rules, hard, fast rules for that. Again, the story is self-contained. I really don't have no problem with that. But the characters are just, if they're new to you, then again, you really have to sort of pay close attention. I mean, they tell people that Nightcrawler is a teleporter. You hear the word teleporter a couple times.
Yeah.
So that's established. The fact that Wolverine is walking around with total amnesia, and again, like seriously, he's having all kinds of flashbacks now in the movie. Mary's going, why, who, what, where, and I'm telling her, well, Wolverine has no memory, et cetera, et cetera. He's trying to figure out who he is. She had no knowledge of that going into this. I mean, there's some. I mean, he goes to the Alkali Lake in the beginning. He goes back and talks to Professor X. I needed to read my mind again. And he says, the mind needs to unlock things on their own. So I suppose from that, you glean the idea that he doesn't know who he is, but they're not clear. So, yeah, again, it's like I said, less criticism as much as just food for thought, something to discuss. Should this be a little more self-explanatory? I'm not sure.
Doesn't it ever wake you in the middle of the night? The feeling that someday they will pass that foolish law and come for you and your children. Take you all away. It does indeed. I feel a great swell of pity for the poor soul who comes to that school looking for trouble.
Well, how about you go and explain to me a score, my man?
So let's see. I'm going to give this one an 8. I definitely think it's a stark improvement over the last one. I'm almost tempted to go for a 9 because I do feel like this, especially for the time, was an excellent, excellent film. It really does explore, and it's great because it's not just a traditional superhero film. The X-Men were always sort of unique in the respect of their mutants and the back and forth about whether or not they're accepted. So that whole thing at Bobby Drake's house was very interesting. It was very enlightening. Very well done. Had for its own part had a very strong conclusion to that scene. Really well done. The whole thing is just aces. It's not perfect, and I have something I'll mention when we come around to what we would have done differently. But yeah, I think it's a great film, and I wish they kept consistent, because again, I'm looking at like all the actors, and I'm saying to myself, like, they really, I wish we lived in the time when people did more films more often. It would have been great to get one of these like every year as opposed to every few, etc. I guess it's a different time though. Anyway, I'm kind of babbling because I think it's a great film and I don't really have a lot to knock on it for. So I'm going to give it a high 8 and leave it at that.
I went for the 9. I really enjoyed this movie a lot. I didn't have a lot to complain about. In fact, my Who Asked You turns out to be a nitpick more than anything else. It's not a perfect movie, of course not, but it wasn't so imperfect that I could really ding it. It tried its best to explain itself. Maybe it didn't explain itself perfectly. The example I gave earlier was like, oh, Gene made a choice. It's like, that's great. That's wonderful. Thank you for explaining that. It explains nothing, but thank you for at least, acknowledging that there's something there. So, and that's probably my biggest, point off for the movie being a perfect 10. It's like, okay, yeah, it tried, but just because it tried doesn't mean I have to give it credit for trying. This isn't a participation trophy here, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I had surprisingly a lot of fun. It's extremely watchable. The action is pitch perfect this time, as opposed to feeling like, secondary. And I think that has to do with the fact that I think Bryan Singer sourced the action scenes to be directed by another director. So I think that's the main difference. I loved the attack on the X-Mansion. I loved watching Wolverine go wild in that scene. That's still one of my favorite scenes. Especially the build-up with him when the guy comes into the kitchen and Wolverine's just fighting him. He's just fighting him. He knows he could get violent, but he's trying not to. He's trying not to until the guy's got the knife at him, and finally he just loses it and just skewers him right to the refrigerator. Yeah. And I love that when he pulled out and the guy slid down bloodlessly, they did it bloodlessly, they did it in a good way, and that you got the point of how badly hurt that guy was by the 6 holes in the refrigerator behind him. I love that.
Yeah.
But yes, no, I enjoyed this. It is the most X-Men of the X-Men movies so far. It got all the characters pitch perfect, had no complaints about anybody. And, I mean, Halle Berry didn't even pretend to try to do an accent here. So right there, that's an improvement, too.
I did notice that. I said to myself the same thing. I said, really? It was only the second movie. She just went, screw it.
2 movies in, yeah, I'm done doing that.
Yeah. Agreed. So, Who Asked You?
It is a nitpick, but it bothered me. It bothered me the first time I saw the movie, and as I'm rewatching it, it bothered me again. Scott and the professor are captured when they're going to visit Eric in prison to find out what he knows about the attack on the president. The next time we see Scott after that is at Alkali Lake, and he's attacking Jean. He's got his X-Men costume on. Where did he get it? Did they just happen to have one lying around for him?
Well, maybe he's like Spider-Man. Maybe he just wears it all the time under his clothes. You never know when you're going to need it.
I suppose, but it didn't really feel like that's what was going on there. It just for that moment, it's like, wait a minute, where'd your suit come from?
That's very true, very true.
It's a nitpick. I know it's a nitpick, but yeah, I would have liked it if they just show a scene when he's leaving, getting ready to leave with the professor, and he's got his costume. He doesn't even have to explain why he's wearing it, just that it's under there and he's just zipping up a coat to cover it. That would have made the hugest difference.
Yeah. I agree.
How about you, sir?
For me, you might not like this, but I did have a problem with the thing with Gene at the end.
Oh, I don't have a problem with that at all, dude. I look at that with dubious eye myself. So
Right. And it's frustrating because I feel like most of the film, most of the story is pretty tight. You know, there's not a lot that seems to happen that's kind of arbitrary. Everything seems to be written in a way that it made a lot of sense. For some reason here, and again, I think story-wise, emotionally, I do think that the choice to kill off one of the characters in a reasonably dramatic, self-sacrificing way was a good conclusion to that story. I think it made a lot of sense. However, I didn't understand at all why. I mean, I just sort of felt like first of all, again, we're dealing with superheroes. The jet lands, the dam breaks, the water rushes down. Okay. Well, this one can fly, this one can teleport, I'm sort of saying to myself, like, of all the people here, of all the abilities that people have, there's no solution. We're all sitting here scratching our heads thinking, what are we going to do about the rushing water? We've been through all kinds of things, you know, that dangerous things, and now we've got rushing water. We're in a steel structure, but for some reason we think we're all going to die any second if the water hits us. Is the plane that lands somewhere? I don't see why this means instant death. But then you have Jean. Why can't she levitate from within the plane? If she has the ability to make the plane float and to get it somewhere, probably not very far. I mean, land has to be relatively nearby. How hard would that be? So the idea that she goes off the plane, has to lift it up, and then she's engulfed with the water. Even then, I'm saying to myself, can she swim?
No, the Russian water's got her.
Again, why? Why is she she's so powerful, but she's instantly dead when the water surrounds her? I don't get it. I just kind of felt like, no, that doesn't make sense. I do struggle with that. I don't understand what that was about. And again, it's frustrating because it's the end of the film. I've put my faith in the script. It's taken me this far. I do not have any problems. Now they're just throwing this little addendum at me, and I'm kind of like, you lost me at the last second. And it's not a big problem, but again, had this been worked out better, it could have taken it up to a 9 for me.
Dude, you're not wrong. It is probably the weakest part of the entire thing. I think that the way Famke Janssen played it worked, and I think the way that everybody reacted to it worked as well. But the lead up to it and the story behind it, moderate at best. Not even. So you're right. Yeah. I'm going to agree with you 100% on that one.
Yeah, but anyway, like I said, and it feels nitpicky, even though it's not. It just feels like after all of that good film, I'm gonna really, give it a hard time for that last 2 minutes. Overall, it's not a big deal, but yeah, that's a big important scene, and they dropped the ball.
Agreed. But, sir, how about for your consideration?
For my consideration, I want to hand it to the fight between Wolverine and Lady Deathstrike. I thought that was honestly, I'm pretty sure. I mean, again, I'm not saying, for example, Logan is a masterpiece of a film, but I can't recall a specific fight that he was in that kind of put more of an impression on me than this one. I thought this one was such a really good, evenly matched, just violent enough scene and creative enough. I thought that was terrific, frankly. So I'm going to give it to that.
I'll agree with you there, sir. For me, that White House opening gets me every time.
Yes.
I feel like it's the perfect tone to set off for the movie. It's a great introduction to the character of Nightcrawler. My favorite part about it is that it was like perfect in both directions. For the audience member who have no idea what this character is, it is a shocking, holy smokes, this is something that the mutants can do as well. It's a great way of introducing just how dangerous a mutant can be. You know, and for like the fans who knew who Nightcrawler was and was excited to see him, this was like, holy smokes, I always knew Nightcrawler could kick butt, but now the whole world knows.
Yeah. I agree. That was a great introduction to that character, and incredibly creative too.
Yep, great music, great editing, great acting. You know, the little things like him reaching into his pant leg with his tail and handing himself the knife. I loved those little things about it. Was just beautiful. Beautiful stuff. By the way, that scene was directed by the director of Final Destination 2.
Ah, that's interesting.
That's right. His name was David R. Ellis. And if you've ever seen Final Destination 2, you want to get an idea of what type of director he is, that's the Final Destination that opens with the car crash, with the logs falling off the side of the truck and everything like that, and hitting cars all around it. That's that director. Okay.
Very cool.
So yeah, that was that. He was the second unit director on this. He was the one that directed almost all the action scenes in X2, and unfortunately, he died. He died in 2013.
Oh, okay.
He was also the director. He was the second unit director on the Matrix movies, and he was the director of Snakes on a Plane.
That's funny. Maybe I'll have to go watch Snakes on a Plane just for him.
Yeah, I would. And thus ends X2, but wait, there's one more. We got one more in the original X-Men trilogy to go. Next week, Joe and I are going to tackle X-Men The Last Stand. We lose Bryan Singer. We lose David Hayter. We get Brett Ratner. It's not much of an improvement.
No, I tell you what, this is the one I'm the most anxious for because honestly, this is, you know, a lot of movies come out that a lot of fans just don't like, and I oftentimes don't get the hate. And I say to myself sometimes, maybe my movie reviewing credentials are not as good because some people are picking up on something that I'm not. I mean, you know, like again, am I Butters? I thought it was pretty good. So I'm very anxious to rewatch this, you know, try to put some fresh eyes to it, and then come back and really get into this one because this one, I can't even call it polarizing because I think most people agree that they don't like it. So I'm curious to see how I feel going in this time.
That makes two of us. So until then, sir, great show as always.
Thank you, my brother. Another good one.
Have a safe trip, man, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you, sir, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe and Dave. Join us here every Thursday for a new episode. And be sure to check out the Reviews Without Remorse channel on YouTube for spoiler-free reviews of new releases. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider becoming a patron. You can find our page on patreon.com. As little as $1 a month goes a long way. All clips in this podcast are used for commentary and critique, and is considered fair use. No copyright infringement is intended.
This is Mayflower 1 calling Mission Control. Do you read me? Over?
At last, not bad. That's more like it. Yeah, this is Mission Control. Identify yourself and give me a position.
The name's Stryker. I'm sitting down and facing front. Why would you want to know that?
Stryker. Stryker.